So who won the NBC Democratic debate that happened last night? Of course, it was buried on a Sunday because Debbie Wasserman Schultz wanted to make it so nobody watched it. I mean, think about that. It happened on a day where there were 2 NFL playoff games, and the day after is a holiday. Today is a holiday. It's Dr. Martin Luther King Day. So they're actively trying to hide it because they want to protect Hillary Clinton's lead, and of course the Democratic establishment wants her to win. The more you hear Bernie talk, the more people want him to win. So they're trying to hide it here so that people don't get the word. But in terms of who won, my take is that Bernie won. Now, I know a lot of you are going to roll your eyes and say that's just, Kyle's bias talking. But understand, guys, I really mean it when I say I try my best to put aside my own bias as I watch these things, and I try to watch it through the eyes of your average Democratic voter. Of course, Democratic voter, when I watch the Democratic debates, I try to watch it through the eyes of your average Republican voter when it's a Republican debate. And I have to say, I think Bernie Sanders won, and I think he won fairly significantly. Now, at the beginning, that's actually not the case. So if you were to ask me within the first 30 minutes of the debate, I would have told you that Hillary Clinton is the winner, and she's the winner by quite a bit. Because within the first 30 minutes of the debate, I think she was more on message, and I think that she was hammering away at the one area where I think she has a genuine advantage, and she's genuinely to the left of Bernie Sanders, which is the issue of gun control. Now, she's not as far to the left of him as she's playing it up to be right now, and as the media is making it out to be. She's trying to highlight the areas where he's not in total lockstep with the left. But either way, I think she was strong on that issue, and if you asked me 30 minutes in, I would have said Hillary's winning, and she's winning by a decent amount. But then everything after the first 30 minutes or so, it was just Bernie Sanders all day long. I cannot tell you how many times he was able to successfully revert questions back to the issue of money in politics. And it wasn't a dodge. It wasn't a, hey, I'm not going to answer your question and let's talk about what I want to talk about. It was more of a, okay, now that's a genuine issue, whatever the thing is they were asking them about, and let me tell you the root of the problem, which led to said issue. And then the answer was always money in politics. And he kept talking about how corrupt the system is and how billionaires own the politicians and corporations own the politicians and Wall Street owns the politicians. And he kept going on and on and on and on to the point where that gut feeling that the American people have about something's off and they're not representing us, Bernie was the one who came around and said, not only is that true, I'm going to give you the details of how that works. I'm going to get specific, and I'm going to give you the inner workings, and you're going to get it, and then you're going to vote for me because I'm going to do my best to change it. She's not. Of course, Martin OMalley, I don't even know why we're bothering to mention him. I feel bad for the guy at this point. Dude, what are you doing? What are you doing? He's at like negative 27% in the polls. It just felt like he was butting into a conversation and a debate between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. And there were points in the debate where he was like, let me just get 10 seconds before you want to... And then they cut to commercial. He's like, oh. There's another part where he's begging the moderators, like, if I could just have 30 seconds on the... oh. It's just, okay, man. It's not your day. It's not your time. I honestly think that Martin OMalley, if he were to do something like this, in the 90s, I don't know how old he would have been in the 90s, so I don't even know if he could have, but just his style and persona and, his version of being a politician, that's something that was successful back in the 90s during the Bill Clinton era, where it's kind of like a fake guy and a sleazy typical politician, but he hits all the right talking points and stuff. And don't get me wrong, he's to the left of Hillary, and I would vote for him over Hillary too. But it's just not his time, and he's just lagging behind. He hasn't been able to surge at all in the polls after any debates. And I love how before the debate, you had NBC commentators who were like, tonight's his night to surge. That's what it is. Like, oh my God, you should be fired on saying that alone. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So I think that the moderators did a horrific job. I think they started out by attacking Bernie pretty strongly and, obviously trying to kneecap him. The first however many questions it was, 2 or 3. Later on, were they tough on Hillary? A little bit maybe, but they weren't nearly as tough on her as they were on Bernie. And they framed the debate around the early questions, one of them being the gun question, so they're immediately going for Bernie Sanders' perceived weaknesses. So I think overall they did a horrific job. They also had YouTube commentators, which pissed me off. Because they said something like, we'll be hearing from the most prominent voices on YouTube. Hello, not to toot my own horn here, but in the news and politics category, Secular Talk is in the top 5% of Google preferred news. So when you look at hey, who's in front of me? It's like RT and the New York Times and like CNN and giant corporations. And then it's like me, the only individual actual YouTuber that's not a giant corporation that's there. And these assholes are like, news and politics. Who should we get? I don't know. Let's get this kid that looks like Justin Bieber with a fucking wig who doesn't even talk about politics. What the fuck, man? But obviously they... I don't know if I even came up in the prep for it, but they would dodge me even if I did come up, because obviously I would ask tougher questions than the bullshit that they're throwing out there. But again, overall, I think Hillary started strong, and actually, to be fair to Hillary, her closing statement, I think, was fantastic also, talking about the Flint water crisis and how this is unacceptable in America and how this isn't right and how we would have addressed it sooner if it wasn't for the race of the people who are largely affected. She had a strong closing statement as well, but overall, I think Bernie was the winner, and I think it was a landslide. So... Again, that's just my opinion. You don't have to accept it if you don't want to, but I want to go ahead here and take a look at the polls, and then we can see if other people indeed agreed with me. So let's go to some of the internet polls here. Now, understand that these are not scientific, okay, but they're worth something. They're worth something. I wouldn't totally brush them off, and I wouldn't treat them as gospel here, but when you look at it, Huffington Post has Bernie Sanders with 71%. Hillary Clinton, 21%, Martin O'Malley, 8%. Slate has Bernie with 75%, Hillary Clinton with 19%, Martin O'Malley with 6%. Politico has Bernie with 70%, Hillary with 20%, O'Malley with 10%. NBC Nightly News has Bernie with 75%, Hillary with 17%, Martin O'Malley with 8%. Now, lest you think... Well, wait a second, this is specific to Twitter, and the Twitter polls are even less scientific than the other Snap polls that are done on the website. Actually, the opposite is true. Just before I came on air here, I took a look at the Time Snap poll, which was done on their website. Bernie Sanders has 86% of the vote. Now, again, take it for what it's worth. It's not the end-all be-all. There are going to be scientific polls that come out later. You have to look at the methodology of those too, though, allow me to say, because sometimes they're very weird in how they do them. But if I had to guess, even when the scientific polls come out, Bernie's going to win, but not by this big of a landslide as he wins in these polls. So there's the breakdown. For everybody who thinks that Bernie Sanders is not a serious candidate, that's just not true. You're living up your own ass. So let's acknowledge things for what they are. Let's understand that nationally, Hillary has a lead of about 12 points or so right now. But when you go to New Hampshire, there's some polls where Bernie's winning. You go to Iowa, there's some polls where Bernie's winning. These are early states. If he takes one of those states, it's up in the air, man. This election can go either way, and Bernie absolutely has a shot. And remember that he's been surging from day one. So there was one point where he was 40 points, 50 points behind Hillary. Now he's just 10 points, 12 points behind her nationally, and he's winning in some polls in Iowa and New Hampshire. If you don't feel the burn yet, you will.